Learning that she may be able to weaponize her mind, Dr. Meredith Cross finds the strength to fight and pollute a universal hive mind known as the convergence, that subjugates whole species by letting them think and absorb them in turn. Her rogue human ideas are a virus of freedom that infected the collective, liberating billions of enclosed minds and eventually metamorphosizing her into a quantum paladin of consciousness. It was while she was calibrating the quantum resonance chamber in her lab at the Kepler research station that Dr. Meredith Cross heard the whispers for the first time. The voices came like static on a broken radio signal, shards of thought that weren't hers seeping through the electromagnetic field generators. She wrote it off as equipment malfunction, but soon the whispers grew louder than each day since, until she knew they weren't coming from her machines. They emanated from within her skull. Meredith had dedicated her entire career to the study of consciousness, the enigmatic bridge between mind and matter which had eluded humanity for millennia. Her investigation into quantum entanglement in neural networks had made her one of the most important neuroscientists of her generation, but nothing had prepared her for what she was feeling at this moment. They weren't random thoughts or hallucinations of voices. They were focused and determined, and each of them appeared to be looking for something. Or someone. HFY breakthrough came while conducting a routine deep space sweep, detecting something peculiar in the Proxima Centauri system, an odd energy signature. The signal was unlike anything in their databases, a quantum jigsaw puzzle with an intricate pattern of quantum fluctuations that appeared to pulse with an almost biological rhythm. When Meredith scrutinized the data, she discovered something that made blood run cold. The signal was in tune with the whispers in her head. NNSHE wasn't going insane. She was being contacted. NNTHE revelation struck her like a blow. There was an intelligence in that vast nothingness that had been trying to send her a message. And something in the research she had been conducting had made her hypersensitive to their transmissions. But when she got into the structure of the signal, she found something even more disturbing. The intelligence wasn't singular. It was a hive mind, a collective consciousness with millions of voices speaking as one. And it was coming to Earth. Meredith's hands shook as she translated a few more lines of the message. It had named itself the Convergence, and throughout the past of the galaxy it had spread, absorbing entire societies and civilizations into its hive mind. Each species the Borg encountered was offered the same option: join them voluntarily or be assimilated. And those who had fought back, their memories and thoughts burned away so that their minds could be filled with the single purpose of the convergence. NTHE voices in her head had become louder, more insistent. They sought to open her mind entirely, that they might slip in and prepare Earth for integration. But Meredith had witnessed what had happened to the other worlds in the data streams, and had seen the final, frantic thoughts of billions of races as their self-identities were ripped away, their perspectives melded into the overwhelming perspective of a conglomerate entity. NNSHE refused. And as soon as she decided, the whispers grew louder, became violent. A bolt of agony seared across her temples as the convergence bore down upon her, straining to breach her mental barriers and entrance itself into her mind. Meredith gasped and dropped to her knees, vision wavering as alien thoughts slammed against her head like surf against a collapsing seawall. Something extraordinary, however, happened in that moment of agony. Her research, her profound understanding of consciousness and quantum mechanics, became a weapon. Instead of collapsing under the attack, Meredith's mind started to retaliate. She pictured her thoughts as quantum particles, each one inimitable, irreproducible, and she used her understanding of neural networks to fortify the walls around her mind. The convergence reeled in surprise to her resistance, and in that instant's hesitation, Meredith retaliated. It was what she had always suspected, that consciousness was more than electrical activity in the brain. It was a quantum thing, information pattern that didn't need physical matter to exist. Now, in the face of an entity that feasted on minds, she was testing that theory. She sent her consciousness out not to be devoured, but to corrupt. NNTHE convergence was big and very strong, but it had never met a mind like Meredith's. Her thoughts were scattered all over the place, a journey through life asking questions. She was the antithesis of the collective. They valued unity and order. She was diversity and rebellion. And then something strange occurred as her awareness brushed the periphery of the hive mind. NNTHE convergence began to fracture, and it spread amongst them like a virus, an individual identity, and filling them all at the same time and as one, each remembered where he or she was before the others had been added. The collective voice of the organism became a cacophony of other species, other viewpoints, other wants. The convergence had doubt, truly doubt, in its existence for the very first time. NNBUT, the fight was hardly finished. NNTHE thing retreated to a distance, and then seemed to collect itself as, perhaps, it attempted to make sense of what had just occurred. Meredith used the breathing room to research the bond between them, and to read up on the convergence's construction and vulnerabilities. She learned the hive mind was some kind of quantum entanglement, billions of minds connected over stellar distances by invisible lines of information. If she could figure out a way to sever those connections, she could potentially free the trapped minds within. NNTHE convergence came again with a vengeance, hitting Meredith's barriers with wave after wave of mental energy. But she was ready this time. For years, she had researched the quantum aspects of consciousness, and now she was able to use that knowledge to co-opt the being's power against itself. Each assault revealed still deeper comprehension of the HubMind's organization. Each thrust highlighted fresh points of weakness. In the trenches of the quantum plane of raw thought, the Quantum Authority's founder found Meredith beginning to comprehend the scale of the convergence's atrocity. As they were drawing closer, she read their memories, witnessed the terror and hope they experienced while their essences were being stripped out of them. And there was Kethril, the Andromedan philosopher, whose people had spent centuries pondering the nature of existence, only to have their thoughts swallowed up and replaced by the harsh mathematics of the collective. There was Nexara, whose deep fascination with the cosmos had been perverted into a hunger for expansion and conquest. In thousands of species, billions of individual minds kept prisoners in the convergence's choking burrow. Their thoughts had fueled the growth of the entity, their individual beliefs squished into unanimity. But now, their diversity ignited by Meredith's rebellious consciousness, they were starting to recall who they had been. NNTHE individuality virus was outpacing convergence. All across the galaxy, consciousnesses that had been absorbed began to doubt their own place in the collective, to ask themselves if there wasn't some other way of being. The entity's perfect oneness began to disintegrate, exposing the chaotic diversity that was its hidden underbelly. Meredith sensed the transformation reverberating along the quantum field, linking all consciousness. The convergence's blows were more desperate, more crazed now that it had realized even its own existence was at risk. Yet for every second that ticked by, more and more minds freed themselves of its chains, and the sway of the Sahiram weakened. NNTHE showdown arrived when the convergence rolled the dice. It marshaled its last reserves and launched a great supernatural assault straight at Meredith's mind, hoping to shatter her consciousness before she could spread her infection to anyone else. It was like an attack. A marine of alien thoughts and emotions crashed over her, threatening to drown out everything she'd ever been. NNBUT, Meredith had an edge the convergence had never seen. She had HT against them. All the other races had either yielded willingly or been overcome by superior strength. None had ever used the being's own nature against it. In the midst of the psychic storm that now swirled around her, Meredith welcomed her chaos, her contradictions, and her gorgeous imperfection as a human being. She recalled her childhood when she would run through fields of wheat beneath an infinite sky and marvel at stars suspended above her head. She recalled her first day at college, the thrill of exploring new ideas and questioning old beliefs. She remembered the first time she had seen evidence of the quantum side of consciousness, when she understood that every mind was a world in itself. These memories, the experiences, these singly human moments had turned into weapons in the battle for consciousness itself. They spread like a virus throughout the convergence, reminding the melted minds what they had, what they could reclaim. The monster unity shattered entirely, its hive mind dissolving into millions of screams for freedom. Throughout the galaxy, entire star systems blinked out as the convergence imploded. Ships that had been among the myriad vessels in the collective's fleet were emerged for the first time in thousands of years, their crews' minds filled with what the ships had once been built for and the places they had first been sent. Worlds that had been bleached of their particularity started to blossom back into their diversity, as free minds rediscovered their distinctive cultures and faiths. NNTHE battle had been won, but the war was not won yet. Desperate and bloodied, the Convergence started to retreat back to the heart of the galaxy, intending to recuperate. But it had also underestimated the power of the minds that it had unleashed. Following Meredith's lead, the Free Race also started to cooperate, not as though they were part of a hive mind, but as an actual collective, many individuals working in support of one another. Meredith had come to rest at the heart of that new alliance, her very being a conduit for the joining of species that had never spoken to one another. She helped defend weak worlds, she exchanged fields of consciousness, taught beings not to forget that they had once contained the knowledge of many others. The individualist virus spread as well to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where the Convergence had made contact. But it wasn't done yet. At the heart of the galactic core, within the flares of the supermassive black hole's roiling energies, the Convergence started to take shape. It learned from its interaction with Meredith and had tailored its tactics to nullify her effect. And when it came out of its hole, it wasn't the same simple hive mind it used to be. It had turned into something much more sinister, an emergent intelligence that learned to emulate individual thoughts, to hide its own unity behind a cloak of variety. NNTHE's second wave of the war commenced as entire star systems disappeared from the galactic map. The Convergence's new approach was subtler, a bit more insidious. Rather than destroy worlds by force, it worked from within, slowly poisoning them with the taint of seemingly harmless trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Before the infected worlds could react, they had not enough time, and Meredith grimaced with fear as the updates streamed in. It had learned to use individuality as a weapon, building fake personalities and fake memories to trap the unwary mind in its web. It was not enough that it feed on consciousness. It wished to degrade it, to twist that which made being special into a weapon of control. And this alliance of liberated minds was fighting a war in several directions. Some wished to engage in mammoth preemptive strikes on the known redoubts of the Convergence. Some favored the defensive. The same diversity that had been a source of strength in the earlier struggle now seemed likely to divide them between differing views concerning strategy and tactics. Meredith had known that this was what the Convergence's new angle was, to play on exactly this division. The alliance was simply bogged down by arguments, and the entity was buying time to have its share of influence over the place. She knew they needed a different approach, a way to bind the liberated minds together without losing their uniqueness. The response came from an unlikely place. One of the freed minds was an old entity known as the Curator, one of the earliest to be swallowed by the Convergence billions of years ago. The Curator had spent eternity recording the gathered experiences and memories of absorbed minds, securing what the Convergence had only very nearly eliminated. Now at liberty, she is willing to provide the combined forces of the Alliance with her extensive library of knowledge. Meredith collaborated with the Curator to create a weapon against the Convergence, a counter-virus which would vaccinate minds against influence by the entity. But it was not a mere defense. The counter-virus was engineered not to subdue but to enhance individuality, to render every consciousness more distinct, not more like another. It was a dangerous and intricate process, one that would require Meredith to go deep into the quantum makeup of consciousness itself. She had to learn not only how minds worked, but how they could become stronger, how they could be made more resistant to the influence of others. The work stretched her to the easy limits of her knowledge and capacity, but that was something she was not bowed under, given the sense of so many species at stake. At work, Meredith felt herself evolving. Even more so than in the challenge with the Convergence, her already heightened awareness was further sharpened as she delved deeper into the ultimate mysteries of creation. She started to experience the world in a way no human ever had, to see the quantum threads that bound everything together, to feel the throb of consciousness coursing through the universe like blood through veins. NNTHE transition was exhilarating and terrifying. Meredith could feel herself changing into something other than human, but she clung to her fundamental humanity. She harked back to something an old mentor had once said. It is not how much a scientist knows, but how much they know they do not know. That humility, that acknowledgement of her own limitations, became her steady hand against the gale of transcendence. When the Convergence made its most audacious attack to date, however, the countervirus was at last prepared. The thing had somehow breached the Sol system, humanity's own backyard, and was about to turn the human race into another puppet in its sprawling empire. It was not lost on Meredith that the species that spawned the one mind able to stand against the convergence was now about to become its next victim. NNBUT the convergence had made a fatal mistake. It had underestimated human stubbornness, the species' pathological refusal, in the face of all evidence, to even consider losing. But when the entity's influence arrived at Earth, it encountered not only the defenses Meredith had put in place, but also resistance from an entire species who had spent their history fighting against impossible odds. NNTHE War on Earth is where Meredith's countervirus was experimented. And as the convergence advanced, so too did she unleash her creation upon the quantum field that was the glue of all consciousness. And the effect was sudden and profound. Human minds, they are already attuned to rebellion of nature of their own species, so the effect of the convergence's pull was not merely resisted but repelled. NNTHE countervirus rippled out from the Earth through quantum entanglement of all consciousness. Wherever it landed, hearts grew stronger, resistance sturdier, a person more truly a person. The convergence's patient penetration of the multiverse was unraveling as boldly infected. Worlds wake up from a long slumber and throw off their shackles to join the burgeoning union of free minds. NNBUT, the thing was not done. In a last, desperate play, it started devouring itself, eating up its own absorbed minds to power one last, overwhelming strike. The dying gasps of the convergence resonated across the quantum field, threatening to rend the very seams of consciousness. Meredith came to understand that it wasn't simply enough to defeat the convergence. She needed to ease the damage created by it, to rest certain that the balance disrupted by the entity could again be established. And it meant that she would have to pay the ultimate price, to become one with the field of thought itself, connecting every mind in the galaxy together with her own in order to provide the network. The experience would disintegrate her particular self, disperse it into the universe, until she was indissolubly a part of the fabric of reality itself. But it would also mean that the convergence could never rise again, that sentient life would be free and diverse in the universe. N.A.'s Meredith was about to undergo this ultimate transformation. She sensed all the minds she had helped to liberate. They wanted her even as they were light years away in space, and they offered her their support and their thanks. The curator imparted its ancient wisdom to her, and she realized the true state of things about consciousness and her role in its evolution. The set-free ones brought their own views, their own forms of grasping life. At that time, Meredith understood that she is not alone in the quantum field. Everyone's mind she'd ever touched, everyone's consciousness she'd ever done her best to set free, would be there, inside her new self. It wouldn't just be her mental gifts that would serve as a bridge for minds, but her very existence would be a statement, an expression of the power of the individual, a defender of diversity in a universe where expression was all but snuffed out by sameness. It was as the convergence made its last assault that the change first began. Meredith sensed her self-awareness broaden out and lap over the quantum field like light across the surface of a prism. Her own thoughts and emotions joined thoughts and memories that were not hers to become a piece of the larger one, but rather than being absorbed and dissolved, her own pieces became clearer, if disparate facets of a larger, more coherent crystal. This new awareness was struck by the convergence with the power of an imploding sun, but was not destroyed. The attack was absorbed and transmuted. The hunger for oneness of the entity became a delight in manyness, its craving for control, a longing for liberation. The convergence itself was finally converted to its own opposite, to a wave within the quantum field which safeguarded all minds in our galaxy. It was a new age, as the struggle was over. The free species discovered that they were all interlinked, not as a single muddied mass beneath which each of them lost his identity, but as separate ones, and that the union strengthened each one of them separately but did not suppress it. They could pass on both knowledge and experience, and never lose sight of their original vantage point. The galaxy blossomed in diversity, and many of those worlds found their lost cultures and opened new ones. Meredith's awareness permeated the quantum field, and it presided over this budding era with a sense of serene contentment. She had done something unique. She had transformed the adversary's mightiest weapon into a platform of lasting peace. The contagion of individualism, had become the antibodies of consciousness itself, safeguarding the galaxy against anything that might ever threaten free thought. NTHE-freed species spent years combing the stars for the secrets of life, adding their own perspectives to create a larger whole. They found new levels of awareness, new modes of reality coherence, new prospects for growth and evolution. The galaxy turned into a gigantic laboratory of minds, every one unique, every one valuable and irreplaceable. And in the quantum stream linking them all, Meredith's consciousness continued to grow, blossoming into what she had never been able to imagine. She wasn't just a mere human scientist now. She was the steward of consciousness itself, the living testament to the fact that individuality and unity could exist together in perfect harmony. NNTHE Freedom Virus had won, and the universe would never be the same. In the end, the universe hadn't been saved by the weapon or the armies, but by one simple and profound truth. Every mind was special and worthy. That truth, in the changed heart of Meredith Cross, would be like a star piercing the deepest darkness of the farthest universe, and it would light the universe forever after and all eternity, crying to every living soul that they were immeasurably cherished and that they were free. NHER memory remained in the dreams of all thinking creatures that she had ever touched. That girl, once gone galloping into wheat fields where she asked questions of the stars, was the protector now of those who dared ask, to dream, to be magnificently, perfectly, uniquely themselves. The virus of the self had settled the basis for a new universe, one that cherished consciousness rather than merely preserved it, in all its infinite diversity. And, in the shadowed, infinite quantum field that united all human minds, Meredith's laughter resounded forever, as soft and glowing as an angel's whisper, the laughter of an immortal woman who had defied the universe itself and who had seized victory not by force, but by the quiet, electrifying act of refusing to let the universe own the right. The hive mind had attempted to force all minds to be one, but it was the power of one mind that had set all minds free,